All right, everybody, welcome back to On Texas Football, special live edition of On Texas Football. This edition is brought to you by Prize Picks. I am Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel and Hank South, wrapping up a Steve Sarkisian Monday media availability. Hard to believe, guys, this is the last technically off-season press conference Sark is going to have. Next time we'll hear from him, it's going to be game week, getting ready for Texas State. But a lot to digest coming off the scrimmage on Saturday. We'll get to Sark's opening statement from today here in just a minute. But CJ, what was your big takeaway from Sark's media availability today?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things. Texas is now heading into game week, right? They're heading into prep week for Texas State. Of course, they're still finalizing some details in, to wrap up camp, making sure that the calls are correct, communication is there. But everything is now catered towards playing a football game. Of course, today is also the first day of class on campus, so campus is abuzz. I drove around DKR a little bit this morning, and all sorts of renovation crews are out there, work teams, everything that you could imagine, as well as some balloons and folks, just celebrating students being back on campus. The buzz is here now. Steve Sarkisian and his guys making sure that they can build off of scrimmage number 2, Jeff, which we heard a little bit more about today as well. And then going into a final, 10 days, 12 days until kickoff finally arrives back at DKR.
Yeah, Hank, I just thought it was good for Sark to give some clarity on, when we met with him on Saturday on the Zoom call, he's coming off the field, it's off the cuff, but he did clarify some things. I don't know if it made me necessarily feel better than I did on Saturday, but at least it helped to give some context.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I took note of today of him talking was he said it was mindless football. And it was in terms of the offensive, inefficiency, what he spoke about on Saturday. And he kind of said it within the structure of, if you're in a normal practice, you have your set plays, you switch hashes, you know what play you're going to run. There's no penalty towards anything. When you go into scrimmage or a game setting, then you have to kind of put it into that structure of a game or a scrimmage setting where there's consequences if there's a false start or there's a hold or whatnot. And so what I took away from that, he said it's all fixable stuff. And so it's not, as everyone's panicking or hitting the panic button on Saturday, it's just something they're going to work. They're working through, and he said it's fixable. So that's probably my biggest takeaway is that mindless football comment that, they just have to kind of lock in and be more, mentally engaged, I guess, in building towards week 1.
CJ, Hank brought up something that really kind of it's one of my pet peeves about this time of year. You can be critical and be concerned about something without declaring that this is a 4-alarm fire and a natural disaster and it's just going to hell in a handbasket, right? Like you can look at it through a critical lens without just thinking they're doomed and they're going to go 5-7 this year.
Can you, Jeff? Can you really?
I'd like to think you can, yeah.
I don't know. The one time that there's a little critique in there, the sky's falling, right? But we did hear again from Sarkeesian, kind of reiterating what we talked about on Saturday and on Sunday. He said, look, the offense came out a little slow, right? A little lethargic, right? He didn't feel like they were ready at the start of the scrimmage, and as a result, the defense kind of hit him in the mouth. And yeah, I'm reading between the lines here, but I think that's something that you're going to see a lot of this year, not the offense, but the defense coming out ready to play from the get-go. I think that's a lot of what Will Muschamp brings to the table is a fire that will arrive the minute that the game begins. Not second half, not whenever Texas desperately needs a stop, but from the minute that ball is kicked off, I think that defense is going to be ready to rock and roll. And I look at it almost in a positive light. Because what do you think the first thing that they talked about in that offensive film room during the good, the bad, and the ugly was, hey, this can't happen, right? We cannot wait until it is 14-0 Florida before we respond, right? So that's something I think, again, you don't want to hear about it in the second scrimmage. You don't want to hear about it in fall camp. But if you do, it's a great learning opportunity. So if you're looking for positivity, it's that this didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And, of course, Sark mentioning it again today is – top of mind for him because he said that word lethargic a couple of times today. So that's going to be corrected over the next 12 days. I would imagine that Texas comes out ready to rock and roll when Texas State's on the opposite sideline in September 5th.
Yeah, I want to clear something up before we get to Sark's opening statement. CB mentioned it in the chat. This wasn't damage control. This is how Sark handles scrimmages. A little bit in the spring. The spring schedule's a little more hectic, but for the fall scrimmages, he likes to meet with the media immediately afterwards on Zoom loud, control the message. Check the sources. We can't find information out of the scrimmage. So he wants the message coming from him, and then he'll have the meeting on Monday where after he's had a chance to look at the film and talk to the coaches, that's a little bit more or an extra availability. This is typically how Sark handles things. And with that said, producer Matt has this queued up. Thank you very much for that, Matt. We've got Sark's opening statement from his availability today after practice. Okay, I guess we're waiting on the clip.
Coming out of it, and after you watch the tape, I really felt like defensively, I credit the coaches, all of them, and defensive players. Like, their energy was really Saturday. I felt like they embraced the conditions, they attacked the day. You could feel it just kind of throughout the day, the way they performed. On the flip side, that was what I Saturday from an offensive perspective. It felt a little, I guess lethargic is the best word for what we've been in practice for how we had. Mentalities wrong in those conditions. Clearly, a couple weeks, Texas State, and we've got to be ready under conditions that we're faced with. So that was kind of the first thing. Second thing, from a defensive perspective, as good as the day was, our ability to communicate has got to continue to improve. We've all got to be on the same page. At the end, the touchdown March hits Emmett Mosley on to kind of win it was just a lack of communication. One guy's playing one coverage, the other guy's playing another, and you end not guarding it. So those things we need to guard against, we need to continue upon, and then improving on getting a line. When you start to use up tempo, we got to be able to get a line and be on the same page. And again, that goes back to communication. So we got to continue to work on that. I felt like offensively, from an improvement standpoint, there were too many simple MAs. And when I say MAs, I'm referring to missed assignments, things that we have done well for 2.5 weeks' time, and then all of a sudden we got into that arena and we made some.
All right, so that's what we got to of Sark's opening statement. Hank, I think going back to the offense being lethargic, something Sark mentioned there that I think is, I don't know, it's good that it happened now and not in the opener, definitely not against Ohio State. But he did say the offense was just kind of running plays just to run plays and not really competing the way they should have. And, you can take that however you want to and dissect it however you want to, Hank. But I think it's good for the offense to like, look, there are consequences when you do miss an assignment. It's what penalties or whatever. It's good to get that out of the way now, I guess, as opposed to, in 12 days against Texas State, or definitely on the 12th against Ohio State.
Yeah, you don't want to be dealing with that in game. You want to get those MAs he mentioned fixed now. Get rid of that mindless football. It's getting real, and I get it from he's talked about the lethargic and maybe tired. I guess they're in middle of fall, past middle of fall camp now, and it's just kind of like when's the game week? Is that what it's going to take to really kind of light the fire? I don't know, but again. And I mentioned this on Saturday, you'd much rather have this inefficiency or, issues now than mid-October when you're in the heart of that just beast of a schedule. So I was encouraged by what we heard today, and as we've had time to reflect on it since Saturday, that, these are things they can address and have ready and have fixed by week 1.
CJ, I want to get to just a couple notes from practice, and we'll have more on this on the channel later. Lawrence Seymour back today, and we've gotten some questions about, and it's a valid question. Could Andre Kojo, who's had a good camp, could he slide down inside and play guard? I don't want to say Sark completely shot that down today, but at least he kind of put in perspective what the plan is for Andre Kojo, at least right now.
Yeah, look, first and foremost, Sark mentioned Saturday after the scrimmage that Lawrence Seymour would return on Monday, and it sounds like he was back out at practice today. Again, a positive, given, that was basically a full week off from scrimmage 1 through scrimmage 2, now back out on the field. That's a positive. But there was a question about Andre Kojo, and just in the sense of, hey, it sounds like he's performing well at left tackle. If you need a body, if you need another option at guard, could you view him as a possibility? And Sark didn't commit yes, but he certainly sided more with no, saying, hey, look, we love him at left tackle, right? He is our third offensive tackle, and you need to have a guy that is ready to rock and roll at left or right tackle if his number is called upon. He cited Trevor Goosby saying, what would that offense have looked like? Would we have even made it to the college football semifinal if Goosby wasn't able to step in after a full year's work of preparation to play that position seamlessly? So right now, Andre Kojo remains a tackle. He's not yet been looked at as an option for guard. Texas will continue to roll out Dylan Sikorsky. Cole Hudson's kind of in that mix behind Lawrence Seymour. But right now, no Kojo at left guard.
Hank, I want to stick to the offense really quick because Sark mentioned something. We talked about it on the channel. I don't want to say quite a bit because there's been a lot of other things to focus on throughout the last few weeks. But he talked about running back, and I thought it was interesting. One of Sark's quotes on the running back, he said it was intentional the way they put that running back room together. Basically saying they're building a roster that can go the distance. And we know that, like Sark's talked about that before. But I just go back to last year, Hank, and you look at, was it overkill to bring in Hollywood Smothers once you already had Raleigh Brown, and we know they had Derek Cooper, and you got Michael Terry there still? Like, was it overkill? You can argue whether it was or wasn't, but Sark, Hank, does not. I think last year left a really bad taste in his mouth. He does not want to get caught in a position again like he was last year where you kind of just have, hey, who's the healthiest running back we have, and throw it out there. You want to make sure at a high impact position like that you've got options throughout a 16-17 game season.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it was overkill at all. If you consider also what they lost in the portal, not to say, there were issues with the running game last year, but when you still have that much turnover, Trey Wisner leaving, CJ Baxter leaving, Christian Clark leaving, like you've got to bring in more guys regardless of what you have at a high school. Because honestly, you don't really know what you're going to get. I think Derek Cooper has exceeded expectations, but again, you can't put too much pressure on a true freshman to come in and step up right away, which he has, which is great. But to get two impact guys out of the portal was a big deal. And, I know CJ wrote in his story over the weekend, it's kind of like a 1A, 1B, 1C type situation where you can go to all these guys. You have Michael Terry that's, been having big plays at times in scrimmages. I know he had a 10-yard plus carry over the weekend, to where you're set for the long run. You look back at 2024, ravaged by injuries. 2025, you just didn't have effective runners, and at times, we saw Wisner show up, but it just wasn't consistent. And so, yeah, absolutely, it was not overkill at all. They needed to address it, and they did it head on.
All right, we'll get back to it here in just a second, but right now I need to thank a couple of our sponsors here at On Texas Football. And this edition of On Texas Football is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks.
We're always looking for ways to make watching games a little more fun. We're always looking for ways to make watching games a little more fun, and that's exactly why we love Prize Picks. It's America's #1 sports picks app, and honestly, it's as simple as it gets. For player picks, all you do is choose more or less on a few player stats, and then you lock in your lineup. But if you're someone who likes picking teams instead of individual players, Prize Picks has you covered there as well. You can now pick the winner, you can pick the spread or the total on games and even fights. And Prize Picks is available in most states, including California, Florida, and even right here in the great state of Texas. So chances are you can jump in today. And here's the best part. If you've never tried Prize Picks before, play your first $5 lineup. And if you win, you're going to get $150 in bonus lineups. Just make sure you use code HMA when you sign up. They actually just updated this offer, so there's never been a better time to get started. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code HMA. Play that first $5 lineup. And if you win, you get $150 in bonus lineups. That's Prize Picks, code HMA.
All right. And this edition of On Texas Football is also brought to you by our friends over at Hayes City Store. There are very few restaurants, and when you go to them once, right away it's a special place, and Hayes City Store is one of those places. Scratch-made Texas comfort food is what they're all about. They got their famous truck stop enchiladas, the award-winning chicken fried steak, homemade desserts. It's all good, and it's all made from scratch. They have live music 6 nights a week, 50 beers on tap, ice-cold long necks, and tasty margaritas. 13 TVs in their ice house makes it the perfect setup for game days. They got their brunch menu every Sunday from 10 to 3 as well, which is outstanding. Hayes City Store is dog-friendly. They've got a tree net for the kids, so gather up your whole crew. Head on out to Hayes City Store. For more information, check out the website at Hayes City Store at tx.com. Hayes City Store, it's uniquely Texas. CJ, I know you had something you wanted to get to. Sorry, I always like when Sark singles out guys that are working hard, and he singled out 2 guys specifically today, including one that I know you've been asking, it posed an interesting question over the weekend about this guy as a havoc player on defense. But CJ, who are those 2 guys Sark singled out today?
Yeah, the quote from Sark goes, the 2 hardest working players on our team right now are Grayson Littleton and Emmett Mosley, end quote. And they battle each other every single day in practice. So when he talks about, the competition between the offense and the defense, or just offense and defense and position rooms, look, he points to those 2 and say they battle it out every single day. Certainly encouraging to hear that the competition between both of them in the slot raises the level around in the secondary and in that wide receiver room. But that was really interesting, right? That was really interesting to hear that Emmett Mosley's name, who's coming off of a 2-touchdown performance in the scrimmage, was the guy that Sark mentioned, because it felt like, throughout the offseason, he's been a guy that's kind of been lost in the shuffle of a Cam Coleman joining the offense, of a Ryan Wingo and his improved hands, and the running backs and the new tight ends. Emmett Mosley's been steadily one of the more impressive workers, hardest working guys on the team, and getting to go against Grayson Littleton every day, Jeff, who, again, two interceptions and 2 scrimmages, that's as good as it gets on the Texas field right now.
No doubt. Hank, one other thing that I wanted to make sure we covered here, because, again, it's been asked about a lot, and Sark even mentioned it in the wake of Tyanthony Smith's dismissal on Saturday. Would Texas go to the transfer portal? Would they try to go get linebacker depth? And Sark was asked about it today, because we're living in a world now where we got guys asking to be waived by teams, cut from NFL training camp so they can go into the transfer portal. But I thought it was interesting, Hank. Sark said, and publicly just kind of laid it out there, like, hey, I like this team. We like our chemistry. We like where we're at. Hank, I think it would have to be something really, really unique that fell in the staff's lap for them to go get anybody. It just doesn't seem like it's a priority right now.
No, it doesn't. And like you said, it would have to be a really unique situation. I know, you look at a guy like Ethan Burke, who, I mean, you've been tracking it closer. He looks like he's going to make the Ravens the way he's playing, at least. We'll see.
Yeah,
but I would think, a guy like him is maybe a no-brainer situation if it was available. But again, it's not a priority. He doesn't want to, affect the locker room at this juncture. And, if you guys are in NFL training camp, they're obviously in football shape, but to get a guy back, and I guess the goal would be to hopefully have them ready to go by SEC play, just to get them, integrated into the locker room and everything. But it doesn't seem like a priority, and I'm not really sure it is, especially with the way he kind of laid out linebacker too. Everyone thinks, you think 3 linebackers. It's like, oh, you lose Tyanthony Smith, you're down a guy. It's like, well, really, if you're playing 2 linebackers on the field and nickel, it's like you can make it work. You just need to get the younger guys up to speed and have them ready to go, which Coach Okpala is evidence that is possible. So, it doesn't seem like a priority, and I don't think it's really necessary at this point.
No, and Brad Spence can play Mike backer. I mean, in this scheme, he's a little more limited in space than he is playing maybe that overhang position or playing off the edge. But CJ, you actually had a note over the weekend on Trent Hendrick, the former James Madison linebacker, who's now on his way to UCLA, because we're just living in such unique, unprecedented times with roster management. It's like, well, I mean, it sounds ridiculous to me that you could go get somebody this late in the game, but I don't know that anything sounds really ridiculous. But CJ, that thing never really got off the ground as far as Texas was concerned.
No, I think maybe there was one loose conversation, nothing to the extent that made Texas, serious contenders there. He, of course, committed to UCLA, but it does speak a little bit more to, the world that we're in college football, where there's options to potentially add to your team on August 24th. And we're seeing that across the country. Obviously, LSU remains in the headlines when it comes to adding players who are in NFL camps or at least playing in preseason games and trying to make them come back and suit up for this year. So Sark said, look, are we going to count anything out right now? Probably not. But are we actively looking? probably not as well. So
Yeah.
right now it remains kind of a wait and see, Jeff.
All right, so that's going to do it for our recap of Steve Sarkisian's media availability today. We'll have more from Sark here on the channel later today. We'll also have more over at ontexasfootball.com. CJ, Hank, thank you guys for the time, the knowledge, the intel, the expertise. As always, thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to Prize Picks and Hayes City Store for sponsoring this edition of On Texas Football. If you're not a member over at ontexasfootball.com, now is the time to get over to the site and check out everything we've got going on over there. New members, $3 for your first 3 months of access. That gets you in the door at ontexasfootball.com. So do not hesitate. This offer won't last forever. If we're talking about it, but if it's going on behind the burnt orange curtain, we're talking about it over at ontexasfootball.com. So make sure you get over to the site and take advantage today. Make sure that you like this video. Make sure you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel, and make sure you've got your notifications set so that way anytime we go live, like we did today, or we drop a new video, you're not missing any of our Longhorn coverage or breaking news. For CJ, for Hank, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howell. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and until next time.